I'd have been more than glad to come down there.
Yeah, right. You know what? I'll do that as soon as I get that approved.
Okay.
Don't hold your breath, right?
Absolutely. I know that feeling.
All right, Doug, this is a fraud examination class here, and we did have a brief discussion, a couple videos on interviewing, but I indicated to them that you are truly an expert that has dealt with interviewing for a long time, that you have your certifications, and that you do a lot of training in this area. So they're really looking forward to hearing your perspective and your stories. And with us tonight is Doug Cash. I'm going to let him handle a lot of his background, but he's retired law enforcement. He's now with I. Bailey. I'll let him fill you in on the whole alphabet behind his name there. But Doug, if it's all right with you, I'm going to turn it over to you, and hopefully they'll be able to ask questions. If for some reason you have difficulty hearing them, I can kind of relay those. But the floor is yours. Thanks for joining us.
No problem, Jim. I appreciate it. You and I have known each other for quite some time, and you know that this is one of the things that I'm very passionate about in reference to interviewing and making sure that it's done correctly. And that a lot of times people don't realize how difficult it is to actually conduct interviews and how important it is actually in fraud investigations. And I would imagine that a vast majority of your class, when they decided to take this, they never really thought about interviewing as being one of the primary backgrounds needed, or one of the areas that you really had to excel in to be able to conduct interviews. And there's not a lot of training out there, and there's not a lot of talk about it. So the more I can try to help educate people and give them an idea that it really is an art, and you have to work at it, and it's not something that you get involved in on a regular basis, but that you have to prepare for a long time. I got involved in interviewing people, obviously, as a police officer. And when I was a young officer, it was always amazing to me of watching some of the other detectives work, and they could get people to do, to tell them what was going on, and they just seemed to have this knack of getting people to tell them what had transpired. And I felt like I couldn't even get somebody to tell me that the sun was going to come up. I had a very difficult time, and I didn't understand that connection that needed to be done. So I started going to class and learning that it's something that you have to work at on a daily basis. So we're going to talk about that in reference to this. The first thing I have to do is I have to show you a disclaimer. The firm says that I have to put this up showing that nothing that I say is going to make you a interviewing expert or tell you what you should do or any of those kind of things. And it's just, this is all my idea and things that I've learned over the last 30 years. So as Jim was saying, my background is I spent just over 27 years as a police officer in Arizona and New Mexico, and part of that was actually a special agent for the state of Arizona. I learned very early on that interviewing actually was an art, that it was something that you had to, it's like drama. You have to learn how to read the people. You have to be able to react off of them. You have to be able to connect with them, and you have to be able to change your ideas and do it on the fly a lot of times. And I have a lot of young people ask me, is there any class that I can take in college or anywhere else that will help me in this aspect? And the only suggestion that I've ever been able to come up with, and I actually did it when I was younger, is actually taking drama classes and learning to interact with people on the stage and learning how to control your emotions or those kind of things, because interviewing people is a very emotional thing. And I've told a lot of people around the country that if many times as a forensic accountant, you're only going to get one shot at interviewing somebody, and you have to do the best you possibly can at that one shot. And if in some very stressful situations, if you don't feel exhausted when you leave that interview, you didn't do it right. That you didn't put everything that you had into that interview. And then you're starting to wonder, did I get everything out of it that I needed to? And that's kind of where it happens. I'm trained in several different interviewing disciplines, and we'll discuss some of those. Conducted hundreds of interviews in many different surroundings, parking lots to attorneys' offices to backs of cars into little rooms. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter where you conduct the interview. It matters how you conduct the interview. I've stood in parking lots and had people admit to stealing $1 million, or I've sat in their attorney's office and had them admit to stealing $1 million. It doesn't matter where it is. What matters is how you conduct that interview and the things you can go on. And I teach interviewing around the country on behalf of Ike Bailey. And at one point, I did teach a 3-day advanced class for Arizona Post in Arizona. But since I've moved out of state, they have someone else teach that class. I have a master's in business and a master's in criminal justice. I'm a certified fraud examiner, a certified forensic interviewer, and a certified financial crime investigator, which has to do with money laundering and banks and counterfeiting and things like that. And I found out that you trial and error is where you start. And obviously, a lot of times you have to go through what we all know, the university of being a fool, because you have to be made a fool of sometimes to understand is that things aren't going to work out the way you think they're going to. And you can't be disappointed in that. You have to be able to push forward through that and to continue to learn. Personally, I've been through kinesic interviewing and interrogation. It's in 4 parts. The last part is actually conducted in eastern Kentucky inside a prison. Each one of these steps you have to go through step by step. Mr. Walters is one of the leading experts in body language alone. He's a phenomenal instructor. But basically at the Correctional Institute, you're in with an inmate for 45 minutes on tape. You're back out for 15 minutes to take notes. You're back in with another inmate for 45 minutes, and this goes on for 8 hours straight. It's one of the most intense interviewing procedures you can go through. I've had basic and advanced read school. I've had basic cognitive interrogation through the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy in Glencoe, Georgia, which is called FLETC. And I've also studied advanced cognitive through the Behavioral Analysis Institute in Santa Rosa, California. That is a phenomenal organization. They also teach you about a statement analysis on how to read statements, because it's amazing how many times people write something from somewhere in a business or a crime scene or whatever, and they actually admit to being involved in the crime if you know what you're looking for and how to read it and to be able to go through that. So one thing I'll let you understand is no one single word, gesture, or anything else is going to be a proof of truth or deception. There's no single thing that I can point out to you that is going to say that person's being truthful or that person's being deceptive, or however you wish to look at it. There's just not a magic wand that you can wave and be able to do this. You have to take a whole bunch of stuff. So you have to look at it, and what you do is you locate the deception, and if it's present in an interview, that's where you lock in reference to your questions, and you start peeling it away. It's like peeling an onion. You have this story that these people tell you, and then you just take it apart. I've also heard it been explained as like you're Googling or searching on the internet your subject, is that you have a general term, and then you make that term a little bit more specific and more specific and more specific until you get down to the root cause of what you're looking for to be able to determine if that situation is what you're involved in or not. For example, I was called in to do some interviewing. We had a client that had lost well over $1 million, and that it was pointed to some people, and one of those happened to be the assistant to the manager who had stolen the money, and they found out there was an additional $276,000 missing that hadn't been identified already, and they felt that this assistant was the one that took it, and they were just going to fire her. And I said, wait a minute, just let me talk to her first. I spent about an hour with her and found out that she had nothing to do with stealing the money, and that the suspect, if you will, or the target, had actually tried to set her up as being responsible for it. And we were able to prove at that point that that other money belonged to her, and she didn't lose her job. I also went to a situation where a company had 3 people they thought had stolen money. They gave all 3 people a polygraph. 2 of the 3 passed the polygraph. They wanted to go ahead and fire the 3rd person, and I said, please don't. Let me talk to him first. And what I found out is that his deception was related to his non-payment of child support, and he was afraid that if that came out, he was going to be found or be held responsible for stealing the money, even though he didn't take it. And our investigation later showed that one of the people that actually passed the polygraph was the person who had stolen the money. So by interviewing these people and tearing it apart and getting down to the root cause, you were able to find out what the truth actually was. So when you go into an interview, you always have to have goals. Every interview you have is goal. And obviously part of that goal is just to get all the information you can. But you want to understand what is taking place in the business or the organization or whatever you're there for, what is actually going on and who knows best. You may start out interviewing one person. They may give you information that somebody else knows more information than they do. So as a forensic accountant, you need to find out everything you can about how that business works and how it, how things flow and who knows about it. So you have to get as much information as you can. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to locate the people that truly understand the business, the organization, or the people that are potentially involved in the matter. Unfortunately, my cop comes out in me because I still call them suspects. Now, you can call them targets or whatever you want to, but to me, they're a suspect because if they're stealing, they're a crook. So what you understand is that obviously you understand the finances, how the money moves, who has access to the money, how is it documented, how is it recorded, how is it kept, records kept. You want to understand all of that and find out what's going on. And then part of it is to determine if the people are being upfront with you. Are they giving you all the information, or are they just holding something back that you have to tear apart and find out about? And to be able to tear that apart and get down to the simple things that are going on. And obviously you want to identify the red flags of deception, because once you identify those red flags, then you start going after the deception. You find this little thing, you find that little thing. And it could be as simple as this. You go into a car dealership because the owner is concerned that the cash that's being collected at the body shop for repairs is not getting deposited in the bank. And the manager of the body shop is so concerned about the cash disappearing that he's actually photocopying the amount of cash that he's taking in and putting those copies in the jacket of the work so it's always there. So you go in and find out that it's just a total mess, that it's really commingled money. So you tried one thing to try to jumpstart something. And what I did was I asked the controller to print out a listing of all their past due accounts for the last 30 days. And there were 29 accounts on that page. 11 of those were to the same service advisor. Well, it gave me the service advisor's number, but it didn't give me the name. And one of those accounts was past due almost 6 months, and it was for right at $14,000, and it was from a business. And I thought, that's kind of weird that they wouldn't collect $14,000 from a business for 6 months and just continue to roll this over. Maybe this person needs a little bit of help. I should probably mention this to the service manager so they can try to help this person get better at their job, kind of thing. So I walk into the service manager and I said, sir, I have a question. And he goes, yeah. I said, can you tell me who this advisor is? And he says, yeah, it's me. And I went, really? I said, sir, can you explain to me then as a service manager why you haven't called this business to collect $14,000 for 6 months? He looked up at me and he says, well, you think I ought to call them? And my head was going nuts. Bells and whistles are going inside my head because he didn't know who I was. He just thought I was an auditor because that's what he was told. And I said, well, I'm sure that's something that we can discuss later. Well, about 30 minutes later, he left for lunch. He abandoned his job, never returned, and we found that he had embezzled $250,000 from the business. Just by that one comment told me that there was something more to it, and I had to look into it. And obviously, there's a time that you're going to need a specialist. You're going to need somebody on the outside to come in. And a lot of times that has to do with how emotional the crime is, or the situation is actually, and to be able to know that you got to get somebody on the outside to give you a clear, independent issue of what's going on. So basically, there's some common names. The first one, we can call it information gathering, is designed to gain as much information as possible. This is just a communication. This is just an open dialogue with somebody. It's usually very friendly. It's non-confrontational. And this is the vast majority of places that your interview should happen and should stay at. And you'll see that it progresses through theirs. Then you have what are called admission seeking or confession seeking. These are designed to gain admissions of responsibility, and you're looking to identify intent. If you're looking to file criminal charges on somebody, a lot of times you have to have intent to commit a crime, so this is where you're looking for that intent. However, if you get good enough, you can get a lot of this information in the information gathering interview by asking the right type of open-ended questions and peeling away all the way down to the bottom and getting the information that you need in a very friendly way. It takes work, and you have to work at it, and it can take hours. This is not something that's going to take 10 or 15 minutes. It can take 3 or 4 hours if you get a chance. And the last one, as we all know, is called interrogation. And I can honestly tell you that's only used by law enforcement. As a forensic accountant, you will never interrogate anybody. You will either do an information gathering or admission seeking. Those are the only two types of interviews that you're going to do. Leave interrogations to law enforcement. That's what they're designed for, okay? There's basically several different disciplines. These are the ways that you can be taught how to interview. And the first one is called the Reed method. The Reed method is obviously taught by the Reed Institute. It teaches a 9-step process on how you interview somebody. From the minute you walk in the room, to how you greet them, to how you talk to them, and how you go all the way through that and close an interview and go through that. The only issue that I have with Reed is that it gives you the impression that you can interview everybody the same way. You can't do that. My experience has told me that everybody that you talk to has a different background, a different philosophy, a different culture. They have grown up someplace differently. So you can't use the same type of questions or same type of demeanor on everybody. There would be no way that I can interview everyone in your classroom the same way. Each one of you is different, and that interviewing style has to be made different to the person. So what Wicklander and Zalowski did is they based that there's process on that 9-step process for Reed, but they tweaked it to make it more about the individual, to where you're talking about those. So there's 2 different styles there. Excuse me. Kinesics is the study of the body, just how the body moves, what it does. You'll hear me say this over and over again, and you'll see it. You can control what you say, you cannot control what you do. Your body is going to react the way it's going to react. Your body moves. It is fluid. It is flowing. It's like a conversation with somebody. A conversation has a flow to it. Question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. So part of that flow, if it's disrupted, that should tell you that there's something wrong. And why is it wrong? And then you have to look into it. It doesn't mean that the person's lying. That just means there's stress or deception there. So I have to look into it. Cognitive interviewing is specifically designed for victims and witnesses. It requires intense concentration. You cannot use it on suspects because most suspects are not that willing to concentrate that much for you. It can be done and learned very quickly. You will not use this very often in forensic accounting, but what that does, if you're able to take any classes, it helps you with some of the language and questions, open-ended questions, that helps you everywhere else. Then you have what's called conversational management. This is used extensively in Great Britain. I have been told that it's probably the best way to interview people there are. This is the only discipline I have not been trained in. I can't convince my boss to send me to London for 2 weeks to go get trained in this. I'm hoping at some point he'll like me a lot better than he does now, and maybe he'll break out his credit card and let me go. But so far he said no. So I have to deal with the other part of it. One that we've all heard about is investigative hypnosis. Has anybody in the class, and I can see the class, have any of you ever been hypnotized? Have you ever gone to a comedy club and they put you up on the stage and they hypnotize you and make you a quack or make like a duck or any of that kind of stuff? Really?
Looks like we have one student is, or has been. Yeah, we've got one.
Okay. So, you can make fun of people, but investigative hypnosis is very unreliable. It's also not allowed into court because it is unreliable and because of the trance. But this is where everybody starts. You start your interviewing career just by the seat of your pants. How do I start? And one of the big things that I found out in accounting firms is that they have these people called auditors. And auditors go out and commit audits. Not commit audits. I guess they actually conduct audits. Sorry about that. They go out and actually talk to people. And they interview people. And they have this little form that's on their computer that's called a risk assessment that they have to ask people questions about. Well, the issue is have they been given any interview training during their classes in college or by the training by their firm on how to conduct an interview? Because you'd be amazed how many times I've watched these young people. They'll bring this form up on their computer and they'll just read from the form and go, do you happen to know of any fraud in your company? Nope. They just type on the form. That's not an interview. An interview is a conversation that you have with somebody. Okay? So there's basically two different ways for gathering information. First one is called accusatory. That's where you walk in and you just accuse somebody of doing something wrong. So ask yourselves this. If you're accused of something you didn't do, what do you do? Do you withdraw? Do your defenses go up? Do you become rather hostile, possibly? Think about that. So automatically you come in and accuse somebody, they're going to back away and become difficult to talk to. But if you walk in and you say, hey, I don't understand what's going on here. I need your help to understand what's happening. Please help me. Who doesn't want to help out somebody? And they're much more, as you can see there, 66% of the time, most people just walk in and accuse somebody. And these percentages came from two different projects through the Home Office in England and the University of Kent in England, one in 79 and one in 1990. What they did is they took a group of people and asked them to go into this room and talk to these people and find out what they could about this specific thing. And they found out that 66% of the time, people would just walk in and accuse them of doing something wrong, and they got very little information out of them. But when they walked in and said, hey, I don't know what's going on here, but I need your help, they got a lot more information. So that's actually scientifically proven. So I'm hoping you can see this, because what happened is that in the old days when you couldn't get anybody to talk to you, sometimes you had to kind of do this. And it's kind of funny, but it's, I'll leave it up to you. I like it. I get a kick out of it.
Tape is rolling. Right, Mr. Murphy. Perhaps you could start by telling us about your connection to Reflections nightclub.
I didn't have any connection to it.
Funny. Because according to this form, you're one of the directors. For the benefit of the tape, I am now showing the suspect Exhibit A19, an application for a mortgage on the aforementioned property.
I've never seen that before in my life.
Really? Cool. Maybe they made a mistake. Right. Perhaps instead you could tell me about the receipts that were found in your jacket pocket earlier today. For the benefit of the tape, I am now showing the suspect Exhibit A27, receipts for expenses totaling £2,496.
Well, what? That's a
wanted in your jacket pocket. Obviously counted. Alright, let's move on. Tell me, do you recognise this man?
Yeah.
For the benefit of the tape, the suspect has identified Martin Wright of 44 West Road, currently in custody. Alright, tell me you don't know this man now.
I know of him, I've seen him, but
That's
that's
not
not
perfect, Mr. Murphy. Let's move on. Right, so when you met Martin Wright, what did you two talk about?
Look, I've never met Martin Wright. I didn't know anyone could... Did you just pause that?
Are you refusing to answer, Mr. Murphy?
Look, these witnesses come on. Well, I'm not that
The
nice.
suspect refuses to answer. Oh dear, oh dear. Not going very well, is it?
That's not right.
Sit down. Now, I can tell you're a very busy man. I'll cut straight to the chase, yeah? Now, I've got one very, very simple question for you. Did you burn down the nightclub? Yes. Mr. Murphy, that's the way. Did you answer what it is? This is a sentence. Please, I've got Mr. Murphy, Dr. So would you answer? Gov. There's no tape in here. Mr. Murphy, calm down.
I'm not gonna calm down.
Give us the gun back, Murphy. The suspect is armed and becoming desperate. Give me my gun back!
Look,
Mr. Murphy, don't do it. You got your whole life ahead of you. What a waste. Lunch? Yeah, all right.
They get a little upset now. It kind of causes problems. People get upset when you do that anymore. So when we talk about deceptions versus lies, I truly believe that everyone is deceptive, but not everyone lies. When was the last time that someone asked you a question as simply as, how does this make me look? What did it, and your response was, well, maybe that's not your best color. Maybe the tailoring's off a little bit, because you didn't want to tell them, oh my God, does that make you look bad? So basically what deception is you're not telling all the truth. So you have to get to the bottom of that deception, determine whether it's a lie or not. You have to tear it apart, okay? However, both are caused by stress, and you have to understand that both of them are going to show differences in language, different in body language, so you have to tear it apart to find out, is it a lie or is it deception, or something they just didn't want to tell you because it's rather personal or embarrassing, okay? Very few people can actually identify a lie. If you're sitting in a room and somebody tells you something, just by what they tell you, you have about a 50-50 chance of telling whether that person's actually lying to you or being deceptive with you, okay? That's just about everybody. However, with the proper training and learning how to do something, you can actually get up to almost 90% of being able to tell whether that person is being truthful with you when you're interviewing, okay? Identifying deception helps you drill down and locate where those lies are hidden. That's those layers that you tear apart to be able to look at it and to see what's going on with people. I get told all the time, well, I just want someone to confess, or I just want someone to tell me what happened. And I tell people, well, if you don't get their stories or you don't get them to account for their whereabouts or what they're doing, you can't either verify it or you can't destroy it. You have to be able to get them to explain to you and what happens. And you may run into people that, because they believe what they're saying to be true to their soul, psychopaths and some sociopaths, that they show no stress. So everything they're going to tell you is that appears to be truthful. So what you have to do is you have to destroy the story that they tell you and use that story against them to get them to admit mistakes. So you have to at least get them to talk to you to begin with before you can do anything else. If you can't get them to talk to you, you have nothing to work with. And that's where this art comes in, to be able to talk to people, okay? So I want you to look at this, and we always talk about what does a criminal look like. So I want you to look at these people, and let's just take the lady. She's kind of the orange collar that you can see. To me, it's on the left. I'm not sure where it's at for you, but she got a smile next to the guy. So everybody kind of look at her, and then look at the crimes that they were arrested for below, and think, okay, which crime did she commit? Okay, everybody got an idea in their mind? Okay. How many of you were correct? Not many, I would imagine. So let's look at some embezzlers. Let's look at people that it's only money, right? They're just stealing money. So let's take the gentleman with the kind of scruffy beard and really short hair, or almost bald, and look at him and think of which one of those crimes did he commit. I wish I had the Jeopardy music to play, but I don't have that. So we let that play for a little bit. So everybody's got an idea. There we go. Is it what you thought? What did these lineups show us? What they show us is criminals look just like you and me. They could be somebody in your room. They could be somebody that you know somewhere else, someone that are friends. It's very hard to tell good people from bad people. And I can tell you that anyone can commit a crime. Anyone can. Depending on how bad things get, you may commit a crime. I learned a long time ago that the term con man is actually outdated. And the reason I can say that is that I put just as many women in prison as I have men. So I have to use the word con person now to be able to fit which way they go. But one thing you need to understand is 75% of all businesses are affected by fraud. And a lot of very trusted employees stole a whole lot of money. The biggest risk for any company is their own employees. So if you go to work as an internal auditor, or you go to work at a company and your job is to figure out what happened, you better be able to interview people well and be able to determine what happened to be able to hold them accountable. Because if you can't figure out who's doing it, you may not have a job for very long, because that means that company continues to lose money. So this is something that you really do have to take seriously, and you have to work at it, okay? So when we talk about understanding deception, this has been around for a long time, and people always ask me, so where did this actually start? Well, one of the things you could say is this. What you have to understand is telling the truth is actually easier than lying. Telling the truth, you don't have to work at. So the earliest one that I've seen or I've been told about is actually from an ancient Hindu scripture called the Epavedas. It was written in 900 BC, and it describes the verbal and nonverbal behaviors of a person who commits the crime of murder. And it says, no guilt is incurred in giving false evidence in case the life of a man depends thereon. In other words, if their life depended on it, it is okay to lie. So they understood how important it was even back then. King Solomon in the book of Proverbs said, a naughtieth person, the wicked man walketh with his proud mouth, he winketh with his eyes, and speaketh with his feet, and teaches with his fingertips. Basically, what King Solomon is saying is that your body leaks. You can control what you say, you cannot control what you do. They understood that even back then. Mr. Freud, he that has eyes to see and ears to hear may convince himself that no mortal can keep a secret. If his lips are silent, he chatters with his fingertips, betrayal oozes out of him from every pore. Your body leaks. There's actually only one way to keep a secret, and that's not to tell anybody. Once you tell somebody something, it's no longer a secret. An organization that I used to not work with, but I came in contact with on a regular basis in my previous life, had a saying, 3 people can keep a secret if 2 are dead. And that was part of their bylaws. And that group is called the Hells Angels. And they truly believe that. And they hold that very sacred to them. Mr. Darwin in 1872 determined repressed emotion almost always comes to the surface in some form of body motion. So think to yourselves, when you get nervous or you get anxious, how do you burn off stress? Are you a leg bouncer? Do you twiddle your thumbs? Do you play with something? What do? Now we have these things called phones that have games on them, that people burn their stress off with one of those to be able to do that. Email, chat rooms, they have all this on their phone, and if they get nervous, you can watch that and see that stress and how they burn it off. Mr. Bacon said, wait upon him with whom you speak with eyes, for there may be wise men that have secret hearts and transparent tendencies. Basically what that means is that you just wait. You have to take your time. You can't rush an interview. There's another saying in the art of war. If you sit by the river long enough, the body of your enemy will float by. You basically just have to wait. You have to wait. You have to pay attention. You have to concentrate. And you have to think about what you're doing. The human being can only think of one thing at a time. So if you're not concentrating on your interview and you're concentrating on something else, I'm going to tell you that it doesn't work. That you have to be totally focused on what you're doing, and you can't have any outside distractions. Because once you do, you've lost where you've been, and you may never get back there again. King Solomon also wrote, the wicked man fleeth when no man pursueth, but the righteous are bold as a lion. This goes back to earlier in reference to, we said, if you are accused of something you didn't do, you're going to be bold as a lion. You're going to stand up and you're going to protect yourself. However, if someone is feeling guilt about something they do, or they're deceptive, or they're not really trying to control their emotions, how upset are they going to get when you accuse them of doing something? If they, let's say that you stood there and you just accused somebody of stealing $1 million, and they go, no, it wasn't me. That should make you wonder, okay, why isn't this person more angry? Are they that control of their emotions? Is their primary dominant personality controlling themselves, that they're able to control their emotions? Or is there more to their story? I need to find out. I need to delve into it, so that's where you start asking your more questions. Every human being, every one of us, has this instinct that's called fight or flight. This happens in interviews. You're either going to fight the interview or you're going to run from the interview. You cannot control this. This happens. This is all about your upbringing. This is about everything that you've done. Think about yourselves. When do you stand up and fight, and when do you run? It happens every day. It happens in everything you do. And it happens all the times in interviews. And you have to understand this is going to happen, and you have to be able to control each one of these. You have to keep the people from fighting you, and you have to keep the people from running from you. Running from you is turning things inside, not answering questions. Fighting you is becoming aggressive and angry and trying to control the interview. And you have to be able to fight both of those and control both of those. Okay? As Mr. Galileo said, all truths are easy to understand once they're discovered. The point is to discover them. Go ask questions. Find out what's going on. You have to now, I'm going to challenge each one of you now that when you are doing things now, go out and find what's truly behind them. And I'm also going to put, I don't want anybody to raise your hand, but I want you to think about it. When was the last time you were in this class or another class and the professor made an assignment and all of a sudden you went, whoa, wait a minute, I didn't hear that. What are you talking about? You were not focused on what he was saying. Your mind was somewhere else and you just missed it. So think about that if that was an interview. You just missed something. Mr. Lincoln, no man has a good enough memory to make a successful liar, as we all know. Mark Twain, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. If you tell lies, you have to remember who you told the lie to, when you told it, how you told it, what kind of lie was it, How many times did you tell that lie, and who many people did you give it to? If you tell the truth, you just always tell the truth. Mr. Roosevelt, repetition does not transform a lie into the truth. Okay, so we talked about deception. We got there. Does anybody have any questions so far?
No question?
Okay, well, I truly believe that this part here, interview contamination, is where the biggest issues happen for all of us. This is where we contaminate the interview, and we have more problems with an interview than anywhere else because of we contaminate it. And I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to look at part of this. Is this an interview, or is this intimidation?
Ryan Tam. Your hind end is the one that's hanging over the edge. Ryan is careless about it. Okay. Yes. Okay. Now, you better start thinking very clearly. Okay. It's you that is on this chopping block. Okay. Am I clear to you? Yes.
Okay, so you think about that in a situation, is that an interview or is that intimidation? And how would you like that tape to be shown somewhere in reference to you getting up into that person's face? What are they going to tell you? How uncomfortable are they? How many of you were uncomfortable just watching that? But a lot of you were, okay? So you have to understand is that that's what people are seeing. And people's perception is their reality, whether that's real or not. As we're learning with social media. Your perception is not always the truth, but your perception of what took place is your truth, no matter whether that's true or not. But it's your perception. So that's what you're going to go with. And that's how people are going to judge you. Okay? As we said earlier, you can only think about one thing at a time. Okay? So how about you? When you're at work or you're about to walk into an office and you're going to talk to a CEO or you're going to talk to the CFO as a forensic accountant, and there's a possibility of several $1 million missing in this to go in or talk to them. How are you feeling? Do you have a cold? Did you get injured over the weekend? Did you sprain an ankle? Did you sprain a knee? Are you in a lot of pain? Okay. Did you just fight with your spouse or your significant other? Did you have a disagreement with the person to be interviewed? What's going on in this? What is your mindset in reference to that? Okay. So what is your current stress level? What's going on in your life? All of this contaminates an interview. And you have to be able to leave all of this at the door when you walk in. Because the person that you're interviewing is the most important person in that room, not you. So all of this can affect you. And if you're having money problems yourself and you had a problem, you're late for a bill or whatever else, if you can't get that out of your mind, don't do the interview. Because you're going to contaminate that and you're going to miss things. Because if you're sitting there thinking, talking to this person, and all of a sudden your brain goes back to earlier, the fight you had, and whose fault it was, and you start thinking about that, you're thinking about that fight, and you're not thinking about that interview, and that person could tell you everything that happened. That happened to me when I very got started. I went to a class, and one of the instructors told me that sometimes as a police officer, you might have to hug somebody, you might have to give them a pat on the arm or whatever. And I went, whoa, wait a minute. I'm a cop. I don't hug people, okay? Especially if they're a child molester. I ain't doing it. I just don't know how to do that, right? And the instructor looked at me and said, look, if I can hug this person and tell me what they've done, and I can put that person in jail for the rest of their life, and they're not going to hurt anybody, I'm going to hug them. So it's my problem, speaking about myself, not theirs. You have to get over that yourself, right? I said, okay, well, how do I do that? And they said, well, you have, in your case, start very simply and start slow, and you have to read it. And it could be something as simple as patting someone on the arm, okay? About 2 weeks later, I'm 6 hours into an interview. I'm totally exhausted. The young lady I'm interviewing has stolen a lot of money. She's totally exhausted. She's bent over, her head's hanging down, her arm's hanging down. She's kind of wobbling back and forth. And I can't think of anything else to say. I'm losing her, and I'm about to get out of this, right? So I very simply reach over, tap her on the arm, and said, we've come so far. Why don't we go ahead and finish this so we can both go home? She looks up at me and immediately starts telling me everything that she had done, all the money she had took, how she took it, and everything else. And my brain went, wow, she's talking. What do I do now? How do I do this? Wait a minute. What am I supposed to do? Why is she doing this? My brain is going all these different directions. I didn't hear a single thing she said. Finally, my brain told me to shut up in my head and just sit there. When she was done, she was very much relaxed. I looked at her and I said, look, I greatly appreciate you being open and honest with me. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes or so to relax. I'll get you something to drink, and then we'll go back over and clarify some things, and we'll get out of here. And she said, thank you. So I got up as calmly as I could, walked out of that room, closed the door, and literally ran down the hallway to the recording devices to rewind them, to replay what she said, so I could hear what she said, so I could go back and interview her, because I had contaminated that interview in my brain because I wasn't paying any attention. So you have to go through some of that to understand how important this is, okay? So when we talk about contamination, part of that is preconceptions. And a preconception is an art of preconceiving. It's an idea, opinion, or it's a bias. Everybody that you know has a bias, okay? I have a bias. I don't like crooks. But I can put that bias aside to be able to help the people that are the victims. That's who I focus on, to be able to help them, okay? So what you have to understand, though, is if you're going to believe the person is going to lie to you, keep you from seeing the truth. So they're going to lie to me. Everything they're going to say is a lie. However, also, if you believe the person is always going to tell you the truth no matter what, it keeps you from seeing the deception. If you fall into one of these places, you're actually a willing participant in the deception, and if the interview fails, it's your fault, not theirs. You have to put all of this outside. You have to give everybody the benefit of the doubt of what they're saying is true until you can prove otherwise. Okay? So with you have these preconceptions, what happens is that you're going to be unable to determine if the physical manifestations are deception generated internally, which is what you have, or are they caused by you? If you have these preconceptions, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. So the interview is going to be lost. So if you have a tendency to disbelieve everybody, and everybody has to prove everything to you, you need to think about this. This is actually from 2,000 years ago, and if they understood that, why is it so difficult for us to understand this? It goes towards making a man faithful to let him understand that you think him so, and he does suspect I will deceive him, gives me sort of the right to do so. So if I walk into a room and I believe, or I get the impression from you that you're not going to believe anything I'm going to tell you, why should I tell you the truth? I can lie to you all I want to, because you're not going to believe anything I have to say anyway. So that's your fault, not theirs, okay? So ask yourselves these. Listening skills, do you really need them? How good are your listening skills? Do you actually listen to people, or do you just hear them? It obviously will help people be more productive, because you actually hear what's going on. Ask yourselves, how many of you like standing around talking to somebody, and all of a sudden they pull out their phone, and they start typing on their phone, and they're having a conversation on the phone and not paying attention to your conversation? It's like, really? I'm not important enough just to stand here and talk to? You know, they didn't even say, excuse me while I take care of this? It's kind of weird, you know. It obviously helps build rapport with coworkers and bosses because you actually listen to what's going on and you understand what they're saying. It shows support. Do you like when you're talking to somebody, do you like them to pay attention to you? Or does it matter if they're looking at other people or talking to other things? You know, it's like, wait a minute, I'm talking to you. I want you to pay attention to me. So it shows that support. It obviously helps resolve problems because guess what? You hear the problem. You actually hear what's going on and you listen to it and you're able to resolve it. Ladies, how many times have you had a conversation with somebody and you made a comment to them in a statement that had an underlying meaning that should be very obvious to them and they don't get it? And you walk away going, oh, I don't want to see them anymore because they just didn't get it. That's where if you're listening, you actually hear those kind of things, okay? And one thing you always should remember, this Chinese proverb, if you wish to know the mind of a man, listen to his words. Listen to what he has to say. Remember, you can control what you say, you cannot control what you do. So you have to listen to the words of what people say. Because there could be only one or two words that gives you an end to where you need to go. That's why you have to pay attention. As Larry King once said, I remind myself every morning nothing I say this day will teach me anything, so if I'm going to learn, I must do it by listening. That is where a lot of people make mistakes. You have to listen to what's going on, okay? So when we talk about this, what's a word? How difficult would it be to interview this guy? This is actually in a deposition.
Would you use for someone taking property that doesn't belong to them? I don't know if I can give you a single answer for that. Pardon me? I don't know that I can give you a single answer for that. Does theft fit? I'm asking for a legal opinion now. I'm not here to give a legal opinion. Taking something that doesn't belong to you is theft. I don't agree with you, sir. That's a blanket statement, sir. I disagree with you. Can you give me any word, not a legal word, if it makes you feel uncomfortable, to describe taking property that doesn't belong to you if you don't like the word theft? So I'm not here to speculate or provide you with legal opinions, but I'll give you an example. There's a paper clip that doesn't belong to me. Am I still on it? You gonna give it back? I don't know. Can anyone, whether they're a lawyer or professional, take something that doesn't belong to them? Do you remember the question, sir? No. Are you more comfortable with the use of the term stealing to describe taking something that doesn't belong to you? No. Robbery? No. Thievery?
So think about how difficult it would be to interview somebody like that in reference to they won't even come to an agreement on what a word means, that you have to work around that to be able to discuss that, and you have to be able to think about how you get into that. Obviously, that gentleman would be a difficult interview, but you have to be prepared for that, and you can't get angry, okay? So when we talk about training and interview training, I truly believe that it is more of it is needed. The actual training to sit down, which is like an 8-hour class, 1 or 2 day class type of thing. Because most agencies, organizations spend their training budgets on motor skills and not soft skills. Motor skills for you folks is like using a 10 key, using your computers, being able to use your spreadsheets, that kind of stuff. Those are skills, is that interaction, that marketing, if you will, that mixing with people, that in communication back and forth. And what I've learned is the vast majority, and I'm sorry, but the vast majority of accountants are somewhat of introverts. They're not people that like to get up and do this kind of stuff, like talk to people in California on their computer. Makes them uncomfortable. But you have to get out and be able to do that as a forensic accountant, because you have to interact with people and you have to know those soft skills and you have to do it well, okay? There's obviously very limited interview training in the business arena. There's not much of it. So you have to look for it. Yeah, you may have to pay for part of it yourselves, but I guarantee you all that does is enhance your career. There's very limited advanced interview training for anybody. People like myself have a very difficult time finding advanced classes to test ourselves and to push ourselves. So we end up pushing ourselves with other people that we work with to help them help us and to move forward, okay? And as we're talking about, this communication thing, if we don't communicate correctly with the public, there can be some issues. Just think if you don't communicate correctly with your client, and this is a big client, and you don't communicate, and you're not on the same page, and you lose that client, and that's $1 million client a year for an audit firm. It's a huge client. How long are you going to have a job if you can't communicate with these people and to be able to understand their problems and to be able to help them? You have to be able, that the whole deal type of this is in reference to the unhelped thing. And the biggest thing you're going to have to understand as a forensic accountant, you will be an expert witness at some point. And a lot of times when you get up on the stand, everything that you've just spent months doing, you have to be able to communicate that to the prosecutors, to the judges, to the jury, and you have to be able to get that out of your head into words and into the jury or the judge in a way that they can understand it, they can see it, and they can understand what you're talking about. And remember, if you can't explain it simply enough, you don't understand it well enough. You have to be able to explain everything very simply to people. You do not use complex words. You don't do any of that kind of stuff. It's very simple English. You have to talk to people. So if you're not listening and you're not communicating, you're going to have a very difficult time. And as a forensic accountant, if they can't put you on the stand as an expert witness because you can't communicate, they're not going to engage you. And you're not going to get further in your career. So this is a very important thing that you have to look at. And the one thing that I always tell people, as this gentleman said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So as you move forward in your career and you're doing things and things aren't going the way you want them to, and you keep doing them and expecting it to change, you're the one that's insane because you're not willing to change. You have to change everything. Sometimes you have to change just basically your whole life sometimes, depending on what the problem is. But you can do any of that type of deal, okay? A lot of very hard work. For most people, telling a significant lie is hard. That's true. But as a good interviewer, you're going to recognize when that person is struggling, evading, laboring, delaying, changing, whatever you want to call it. That's where your issues are, and that's where you have to tear it apart, and you have to work through it and move through it, okay? 93% of all communication is nonverbal. You can control what you say, you cannot control what you do. Your body moves, it flows, it moves around. It has that. So when you look at communication, 65% is just the body itself, nothing else, just the body. 7% is the words that you say. Again, you can control what you say, you cannot control what you do. So your word, you think about all the stuff that people do, and one thing I'll tell you, is that if somebody said something, they thought it. There is really none of this misspeak. If you say something, you thought it. And you need to hold those people accountable, including yourselves, in what you're saying. Okay? 12% of communication is just in the voice quality. This is in the pitch. This is in the rate. This is in the volume. That's where that is. So you put all of these things together, including 16%, which is the microsignals. This is just things that happen in less than a fifth of a second that you have to concentrate on. If you ever get to the point that you're able to identify these micro expressions and pick them out that quickly, you're going to be a huge success at interviewing people, because everybody has them, no matter who they are. They have those, okay? But all it does is show where that's deception in their answer, so you have to tear that apart and keep going, okay? So when we talk about nonverbal and verbal communication, as I said, you can control what you say and what your body does. Verbal clues will jump out at you. They will literally jump off the page, and it's like the gentleman who said, "Do you think I should call him?" To me, that jumped off the page like, we have a major problem with that wording. Because it should have been something, well, I'll call them, I'll look into it, I guess I missed that one. Something like that would have been an answer that you would expect. Not do you think, he's asking me my opinion if he should call these people. Whether it's like my decision or not that he calls to collect $14,000 for the company. That's not my decision, that's his decision. Because he's the boss. So those are the kind of things that, like, that doesn't make any sense. So that's where it jumps out at you, and you have to delve into it and look into it. And you can't react to these. That's like I told him, well, that may be just something we'll discuss later. I knew inside myself that that was a huge red flag, and that we were going to find something related to him, which we did, okay? So the subject being interviewed is hoping that you didn't catch that. I've done interviews later on in people, including in homicides, where they're already serving time on the homicide, and they've never admitted to anything, but during talking to them later on in what's called a free talk, that they actually admit to the murder or being involved, that they're hoping that it slipped out that you missed. But you can't react to that. You have to just let it go, because what you're going to do is you're going to use that later on to be able to bring that back in tearing that onion apart, to be able to get further information in reference to it. Okay? So where does this all kind of start? This is actually the minute you walk in the room, this is how you start it. And this is that conversation. Question, answer, that flow of conversation. The technical term is called calibration. What you're doing is you're establishing a baseline of how a person's verbal and nonverbal responses are to very truthful to non-sensitive questions. How's your day? Where part do you work? What are your job duties? What do you do on a daily basis? Where did you go to college? Blah, 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 blah. If you're able to identify something, that let's say you walk into their office and they're a skier or they're a golfer, and you can tell it by looking at their pictures. Now you've got something, if you're into the same thing, you've got something to talk about. Even if you don't, you've got something to talk about. So you can use that information to get non-sensitive questions. Because later on, when you start increasing the stress and start asking more questions that are going to elicit a more direct response, you're going to be able to see their changes in their verbal behavior and in their nonverbal behavior, and you're going to be able to relate back is that, okay, under non-stress, this is how they acted. And now under stress, this is how they acted. So this is where that issue is. It could be on one part of a comment. It could be on one area of a discussion. It could be in one sentence that you're talking about, okay? But what this is, like I said, this is called calibration. I just call it setting a baseline. I set a baseline with everybody you talk to. This can take 5 minutes, or this can take 5 hours, depending on the person, depending on your abilities, depending on their primary dominant personality and depending on a lot of other stuff that you have to throw into this to calibrate these people. But you'll find out is the more you do this, the faster you can calibrate somebody. You know, I told Jim this a long time ago. I don't even remember. I used to work here, and near where I worked was a mall, and that mall had a food court, and I would go there if I had nothing else going on, and I'd have lunch. Really, I had a Panda Express, so you get a Panda Bowl, right? I was set in the food court, and I would watch people walking by, and I would pick out the couple that was fighting about something. And I would get up and I would follow them. And I'd find out how close I could get up behind them without them knowing I was there to listen to their conversation. To figure out who was at fault, what were they fighting about, were they being honest between each other, and just sit and study people. And if I was walking along and I saw somebody going the other direction, I just leave them and go walking with the other people. Well, I've been lucky enough, security hasn't said anything yet. I'm sure they're probably kind of, they watch me when I walk in the door because they think, oh, there's that crazy guy again. He's going to follow people. But that's how you study people. And you do that. So I tell people, now, when you guys go somewhere and you're out with a group of friends, you've all had this conversation that, you know, the circle of friends, depending on how close you are, the distance is, right? Well, pick out a group of people that you're friends with and pick somebody out in that circle and walk up and stand right next to them, almost touching your shoulders, and just talk to them and go, hey, what's going on? Nothing. And watch them step away from you. So what you do is you step towards them. And you see if you can move them all the way around the circle. The whole circle shifts. Just keep moving it around. And if you get tired of that, pick somebody out on the other side of the circle, walk across the circle, and stand next to them and move the circle the other direction. Just to learn how people interact with each other. That's part of the learning process that you can do, okay? There's really only two forms of deception. One is called omission. This is where you just don't tell anything. The other one's called embellishment. So think to yourselves, when's the last time you embellished something? That's the big fishing. I caught a fish this big, okay? Type of thing. Everybody embellishes. Everybody does. But these are the forms of deception. And these are the reasons people are deceptive. You know, obviously, probably the biggest one is the fear of the unknown. You're not sure what's going on, right? You're nervous. What's going to happen? What's going on? You don't want to be punished, so you're trying to avoid it. So you're deceptive. And why do the symptoms appear? It's because you're afraid of being discovered. You actually, if you have a normal person, you're going to feel some guilt for it. But there are actually people that enjoy lying. How many of you folks actually have either interacted or know somebody who's a pathological liar? Think about how they react, okay? They enjoy lying. It's hard to tell when they're telling the truth. So when you look at an interview, you have actually 4 steps. You have the orientation, where you go in and tell them. Narration, they're talking back to you, telling you their part. You're cross-examining them about what they said, and you come to a resolution. So you talk, they talk, you come to an end. That's all there is to it. But all of these parts take time, and you have to learn each one of these, and you have to move forward. Everybody goes through stress, and there's actually 5 forms of how you respond to stress. This also is a lot on how people breathe. Anger, denial, depression, bargaining, and acceptance. I will tell you that the vast majority of your interviews will start at denial. People are denying that they did things, and you have to work through that, and they will work themselves through this. If it starts at anger, it will take you a while to get rid of that anger. And a lot of times people will use anger to be able to try to control you and try to control the interview. It is a deceptive behavior. It is doomed to fail. And if you do not lose your cool, you can get away from it very quickly. But you have to stand your ground and you have to deal with it. You can't get drug into it, okay? So how do we take all of this and we tell accessing truth or deception, okay? So what you do is you take their verbal and nonverbal responses to your questions. You put it all together with what you see, and that's how you respond. People that are truthful, like the lady on the left, they're talking, we talk with our hands, they move around, it's a flow of communication, because you remember your body just moves, right? Well, the gentleman on the right is trying to control his body. It doesn't look natural. So there's a problem there. Why is he trying to control himself? Why is he trying to hold on? Why is he trying to keep his hands and stuff from moving? There's something wrong there, and you delve into it. So when you think about this also, how many folks have ever thought about the eye movement of people? You know, we talk about eye contact, that normally, you know, it's about 30 to 60% of the time, it's not consistent between two people, and it changes. Deceptive subjects avoid eye contact in some areas. In other areas, they may increase it. They may just start staring at you. But normal eye contact is about 30 to 60%, and it fluctuates, it changes. So what you're also looking for is those changes that are outside that norm to show you that deception is present. This is probably where the areas that you have to think about. How many of you folks actually know whether you're left or right brain dominant? Okay. Being left or right brain dominant will tell you where you're going to store information. Okay. If you are a left brain dominant person, okay, you're going to store the data under like numbers and things like that. But everything that you have is data, and it can be numbers, a smell, a taste, a feel, a sight. All of that is stored in different areas in your brain. Okay. If you think about it, and you hear July 4th, December 24th, January 1st, all of those dates bring up something in your mind. Okay, everybody has a different thing about that. Birthdays, anniversaries, where if you have a favorite perfume, a favorite flower, a favorite food, how many times have you been someplace and you smell something and it takes you back to someplace you've been before? All of that is sensitive information, and that's stored on the right side of your brain. Okay? So you have this different things, your feeling, your touch, it's all stored in different sides. So what you need to look for and understand is that if somebody's looking for data and numbers and specifics, that's all going to be stored normally on the left side of the brain. If they're looking for things on how it feels, how it tastes, how it smells, that's all sensitive information that's going to be stored on the right side of the brain. So if you're asking questions and it all deals with data and they're retrieving information because you're paying attention to how they're retrieving it, and they're getting it all from the same area of the brain, and now you ask a question where it's the same type of question, but they're accessing that information from a different part of the brain, your response to yourself should be, why? Why is that response different than the rest of them? I need to make a note and go back and deal with that because that information came from someplace else, which means that it either could be embellished, it could be made up, or it could not be a lie. But you're not going to know if you're not paying attention and you don't go back and ask, and to be able to look at people, okay? So what you understand is the more comfortable you can make the person, the better the recall is. That's why you should interview people where they're comfortable, okay? Recalling some facts is very taxing. It does take a lot of energy, and you have to understand that. They may need breaks, they need to have lunch brought in, whatever you need to do to make them comfortable and relax, okay? Your mind will protect itself from harm. If something tragic has happened to you, your mind will protect you from that. And you have to understand that that's going to happen. Memory failure only happens in 3 ways, okay? One is that you just didn't put enough information to it. Think about all of us have met somebody on a passing and you just didn't catch their name. You see them later and you're going, what in the world was that person's name? Well, you didn't attach any specific information to that person to store it. It's in your long-term memory, which you can get out through cognitive interviewing, but it takes time to get it. If you go through trauma and it is an ego defense, your mind is going to repress that. If you've been shot at, if you've been stabbed, if you've been in a very violent situation, your brain will block that out. And that is an ego response. And that is information that you can verify. That they will have doctor's records, they will have some type of information to give you that some traumatic event happened to them. But when people choose, or they say, I don't recall, and they're selective, that means they're doing it on purpose. Okay? And that when people can't recall, I don't remember, I don't recall, that's how you can use this information to go, look, I understand you think you can't recall, but this is the only way that memory fails. And this is how it happens. Okay? So now we need to figure out what it is. Is this something significant? This wasn't significant. Well, wait a minute. You stole $1 million. That's pretty significant. I would think that your brain would remember that. So now we need to talk about that. But I don't recall. Well, were you involved in a traffic accident? Did you have something happen to you? Yes, I was. Okay, well, can you show me the traffic accident? What was the police report number? Something to try to verify that. And you can use that information against them, okay? This is how your brain works. What research has found, as long as the letters, the first and the last letter, are correct, the mind will change the rest of the letters around as long as they're all correct. And you will be able to read that. That's why when we do our own reports and stuff, we read what we think is there when it's not actually there. And I show this to people so they understand is that that's why you need help sometimes reviewing your information in your reports before you let anybody else do it, because you can make these mistakes and read it 4 or 5 times and not catch them. So to be able to do that, okay? So we talk about nonverbal cues and truthful and deceptive. You have strong possibility of truth on one side, deceptive on the other, and you can see the steps that goes through in reference to going down through there. And then when you talk about nonverbal behavior, truthful and deceptive, this is how people are in their interviews and their presence. This is how they are. And you think about how they're going, and it can bounce back and forth. Okay, this is a strong sign of being truthful. This is a strong sign of being deceptive. I got to remember this area, and this is not difficult to remember once you start getting into this. Okay, you'll do that. So how do you tell? So this is a truthful person. They're upright, open, relaxed, flow. Question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. Right? Deceptive people, slouching, retreating, that kind of stuff. So when we get in there, gestures that are commonly associated with deception, okay, are these. Personal gestures, grooming gestures, supportive. So when you look at these, then we go through them, and these are the personal gestures. When people start doing these things, and these have to happen within 3 seconds of you asking a question that's sensitive. If it doesn't happen within 3 seconds of the question, it doesn't mean anything. It has to happen very quickly to the question. There's stress involved. If it happens after that, it's just happening. That's why you have to be able to do that. That's one of the reasons it's so difficult to interview people over the phone or through Skype or whatever, because you don't have that instant. There's a delay in it. So you have grooming gestures. You know, they're doing that. You ask a question, they start messing with their hair or flicking it or whatever else, picking lint off of them. Supportive. Now, if you walk into a room to interview somebody and they're sitting there and they have their hand, their chin in their hand like this, and they sit there for 45 minutes and they don't move, that's a problem. They're trying to control themselves. Also, if you see the person that puts their hand over their mouth like this when they're talking, Basically what they're doing is trying to hold the words in their mouth. They're trying to keep them from coming out. Okay? So, external gestures is where they're smoking, they're looking in briefcases, they're playing with their phones, they're playing with other objects. You want to try to eliminate this as much as you can. That includes yours. Turn yours off. Okay? There's a lot of research out there now that says that deceptive subjects do not use conjunctions as much as truthful people. That they're more likely to say, no, I did not do it, could not, would not. That kind of stuff, because they're emphasizing the not. Where if you just say it, yes, I did, or no, I didn't. I didn't do that. Okay? Evasive is why would I risk that? And nonverbal is you just kind of shake your head and doing those kind of things. So these are verbal responses. And when you look at truthful again and deceptive on one way and how they go down through there, and this is what we're talking about in reference to the question. If you ask a question, it's a question, answer, question, answer. Most questions, there's a less than about a half a second response. You ask a question, it's responded. Okay, everything goes through there. Now, if you're going along, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, why is there a delay? The longest delay I've personally had from the time I asked a question to the time they answered was 27 seconds. That they were taking that 27 seconds to come up with a response. To them, it's not 27 seconds, but to you it is. But you can't say anything during that silence. You just have to sit there and wait for them and time it. Okay? And one thing to always remember, when you're reviewing them, they're reviewing you. So if you don't care to be there, why should they? Not too long ago, I walked into a Starbucks and I saw a young man who was obviously being interviewed. Very nice suit on, has papers in front of him, sitting up nice and straight at a desk. And there were two people sitting there talking to him. And one was a young lady. She was slouched down in her chair, had her BlackBerry up in front of her, and was typing on a BlackBerry. The other one was a guy. He was sitting sideways in the chair with his arm hung around the back, asking questions. What kind of a impression were they giving this young man? It's like, well, you don't care to be here to talk to me about this job. Why should I be here? So why should I try my best? It's those kind of things that you have to understand is that when you're interviewing somebody, they're paying attention to you, just like you're paying attention to them. Okay? So go ahead and finish up. As the Dalai Lama said, when you talk, you're only repeating what you already know. But when you listen, you may learn something new. Amazing, isn't it? Dr. Paul Ekman is also one of the leading experts in body language. He teaches, and he actually, there was a series on TV called Lie to Me. And he was the scientific person behind that. He does a lot of research. And he wrote a book called Telling Lies. A liar can choose not to lie. Misleading, misinformation is deliberate. The liar may not be justified. The liar may be a good or bad person, liked or disliked. The person who lies could choose to lie or be truthful and knows the difference between the two. They know. And this is Janie Driver. Many of you may have seen her on TV. She's very good. She's got a book out that says You Can't Lie to Me. It says convince versus convey. Liars try to convince us of something, whereas truthful people simply convey information. They're just telling you what's going on. They're not trying to convince you that it's real. They're just giving it to you. Okay? So what are the characteristics of a good interview? Should be of sufficient length to get everything you need. You want to get all the pertinent information you can out of it. It's aimed at gathering information in a fair and impartial manner. You're just there to gather information. Remember that silence works. If you can't, sometimes you just stop talking to see what they have to say. Just to see if they'll add anything to what they're going through. Okay? What's a good interviewer? A good interviewer is a people person. How many people do you know that they just want to share information? You want to talk to them. They're the people at the water cooler. They're your friends or the people you talk to on a regular basis. They're people you wish to share information with. They're going to make good interviewers. Okay? A good interviewer doesn't interrupt the answers being given. Because if you continue to interrupt the person when they're talking, they're going, well, you don't want to hear what I got to say. Why should I say it? I'm just going to say it and be quiet. Okay? And like I said, you obviously have to convince them that you're not out to get them. You're out to get to the information and get the truth out. Okay? You're not biased, and you want to be fair in all of your dealings. And if you tell somebody in an interview that you're going to do something, make sure you do it. Don't lie to them. Never lie to the people that you're talking to. Okay? And you don't want to point out the deception because they may change it. They'll argue about it. But probably one of the big things is if you're working for a company like an internal audit and you're teaching these people what you're looking for, the next time you go out and talk to them, you're not going to see it because they've already taught other people and they've talked about it. And if you don't think that the people you talk to are going to talk to other people, you're sorely mistaken because they're going to share information with other people in a company. All deception signals are a form of stress, but not all stress responses indicate a person is being deceptive with you. It's just stress. You don't want to focus on just one area of the body. You want to use as much of it as possible can. If a person moves in or leans in towards you, is not necessarily a sign of acceptance. In fact, it may be a sign the person is trying to control or intimidate you. The movement of a person's body away from you is not a good sign. The first one was fighting. This one is fleeing. You're trying to fight or flee. This one they're trying to flee. Now, if you can get a look at the whole entire lower body, that is a good indicator. In fact, if you got somebody who's a leg bouncer, if you get good enough, you can make them speed it up, slow it down, speed it up, slow it down, change legs, change positions, so you can get them to go like that. Especially when you start doing that to attorneys. That's a lot of fun. Okay? Very few hand motions have anything to do with deception because of the fact that everybody talks with their hands. Crying can occur with any emotions. You don't get a dilly bar every time you make somebody cry. It doesn't happen that way. Okay. How many folks in here have heard that if you look up and to the left, you're telling the truth, and if you look up and to the right, you're telling a lie? Okay. I'm here to tell you that's very unreliable. And the reason that is earlier we talked about you being left brain or right brain dominant. That has to do with you store stuff. This is how you're retrieving it. You're looking for it. This has nothing to do with deception. This has to do with retrieval. This tells you where they're storing the information. And never, never be afraid to ask for help. Ask someone else that's around you to talk, to give you pointers, to help you come up with questions. Never be afraid to ask for help. Okay? These things will destroy an interview. Massive note-taking. If you're just sitting there taking notes and taking notes and taking notes and you're not paying any attention, you're going to destroy your interview. Asking too many short-answered questions or yes and no questions. You have to learn to ask open-ended questions so that it is a narrative-based interview, so they're talking. The more they talk, the better. You don't want to ask for information out of order. You want to start at the beginning and go to the end. You don't want to start and bounce around in the interview. You want to work through it just like you're walking through a house. You walk through it, you ask the information. Don't interrupt them, let them talk. And obviously not paying attention. This is probably still the biggest one, your demeanor. If you don't care to be there, they don't either. So you have to pay attention to them. Obviously, no practice. No practice in reading people, no practice in talking to people, no practice getting up in front of people, any of that kind of stuff. You have to practice. Okay? Two things to always remember. In your career, you'll interview many people. Interrogations are conducted by law enforcement, not by us. Anytime you're talking with someone, an interview is taking place. Anytime you're just having a conversation, technically that's an interview. Information is moving across from friends or whatever. Okay? Now, I like to share this with you because this may come in handy in a lot of different places. So I tell people is that this is you walk up to someone, and this is how you tell they're under stress. This is what they call 3 whites. Everybody, when you look at somebody, when you talk to them, will have 2 whites, one on each side of the eye. Now, 3 whites will have either both sides on the bottom or on the top. And what that does is it shows that their stress level is getting up there, and it's going up. Now, if you walk up and you talk to somebody and they look like this is called 4 whites. Their stress level is just as high as it's going to get. they're about to bust. I tell you this because if you see somebody this stressed and you have to interview them, you have to bring this stress level down as quickly as you can to be able to communicate and get anything out of them so they're not agitated. So what you do is you get them a drink, you start talking to them about something else, you remove them from the stressful situation, whatever you need to do to get this down and away from them. Okay? So, I think we'll go ahead and have some questions.
What questions do you have, Doug? That's time. Yeah.
You said that you shouldn't interrupt people during interviews, but our book said something about when they're being deceptive and you know that they're being deceptive, then you should interrupt their confession. Is that right? I've kind of dumped all the information now that we had our exam.
I think she's referring to our book or whatever was talking about when a person's starting to make an excuse during an admission-seeking portion, and they start to make an excuse or a denial. It talks about interrupting the denial because the deeper they get into it, it's harder to reverse. It's basically the concept they were talking about.
Yeah, stop and denial. There are some procedures that tell you that that will work, and it will tell you that, and other people will tell you that it doesn't. That's going to have to be something that you're going to have to try, and you're going to have to do it for yourself. There are some people that will work on is that, I can be honest with you, there are situations, depending on the person, I have had people tell me that, in reference to one out, is that they're about to swear to God that they didn't do something, and I will stop them right then and say, look, do me a favor. If you're about to swear, you're about to lie. And it's okay to lie to me, just don't lie to God. I don't want you to do that. So if you're going to lie, just lie, don't swear to it, kind of thing. So it does work at some times. Some people will tell you that's exactly what you have to do. What I'm saying is that you have to try it and see if it works. It works. It will work better in an admission-seeking interview than it will in an information gathering. So you have to be able to make sure which type of interview you're conducting, because if you're trying to conduct just an information gathering in a non-threatening way, if you're doing that, you're turning that interview into more of a confession seeking, and it's going to put more stress into it, and you have to be able to flow with that. So that's something that you can do. It just takes practice.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
You kind of answered it, but the question I have is, the more information you have, either incriminating or just general information you have on the interviewee, does it help during calibrating? Like as far as norming, like if you know that you have a lot of information on them, so when you calibrating that person, does it help because you have more information on them?
Correct. The more information you can get from them, the faster you can calibrate, and the easier it is to tell how they're going to answer questions. You are correct.
So, and just a kind of another version of that, if you get background information on a person, on your interviewee before you go into the interview and begin the interview, does that help with the calibration process?
You mean if you get the information from someone else, Jim?
Yeah, just research. You know more, you know something about that individual before you even go in and talk to them.
You can have that information, but I don't believe that will help you because they're not giving it to you. You already have it. Now, you can verify that information and not tell them that you have it and just find out if the information that you have is correct. They may have lied on their resume. They may have lied someplace else in reference they are. So you can do all the research, but you still have to ask them the questions to be able to get their responses from you, because you don't know how they're going to respond unless you ask.
Okay. Other questions?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, these are actually 4 I'm usually asked. One is that, am I related to Johnny? And I said, no, well, I don't know. My grandmother tells me that I am. I said, if you want to fight with her and tell her that I'm not related to Johnny Cash, that's entirely up to you. I'm not going to fight with my grandmother. I did not change my last name to work fraud. It's been Cash for a long time. I always tell people you can never have enough cash, but that's okay. I had an attorney ask me one time, did my middle initial stand for embezzle? And I thought that was kind of cool. Embezzle cash, that's kind of cool. I thought maybe I'd use that on a campaign sign somewhere. I don't know. But one of the biggest ones I get asked all the time is, what is the biggest difference between what I do now as a forensic accountant and what I did as a detective? And there's actually only one major difference, is I don't put handcuffs on people anymore. But I actually have a set of handcuffs in my drawer that when I get stressed, I take them out and I click that sound, we hear it clicking. Because I go, oh, that sounds so nice. Someone's going to jail. It's like the old saying, when a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. When handcuffs click, some embezzler's going to jail. It's got a nice sound to it. Always remember, the truth fears nothing. It feels nothing but being concealed. Make sure you're truthful. Don't conceal the truth. Always be honest. The truth never changes. Lies always do. The truth will set you free. It may make you miserable at first, but it will set you free. And the one that has got me through some very bad times in my life, the only easy day was yesterday. So I thank you for your time. I wish you the best in your careers. If I can ever be of assistance or help out in any way, don't hesitate to let me know. This is my contact information. You're welcome to email me or call me. Jim and I have been friends for a long time. He can always get hold of me. So good luck. Unless there's some other questions, I will let you meet up on the instructor.
Doug, I think we did have another question, and then I actually have one for you.
Sure, go ahead.
Did you have one?
Yeah, mine was really similar to the last one.
Oh, okay.
Like how the transition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question, Doug, and so, and this, I don't know if this is, I guess it would be during an admission-seeking or confession-seeking interview. But if you're in the process of admission-seeking, and obviously you've done an investigation, you've got some evidence, talk for a minute about how you use or reveal evidence, or how you don't, and what are some of the do's and don'ts about about doing that. I mean, generally you're trying to get information and not give it, but there are times where it can be beneficial to reveal something. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. There could be times that you have, let's say that you are doing a case that you know, or you have evidence that the person you're going to be talking to has forged signatures on checks, and you have those checks, or you've had checks that have been altered and their name has been added to them, and they have falsified records that they've turned in for, let's say, expenses, and you've been able to get what are commonly called third-party copies, which are normally from the bank accounts, or for the bank, credit card companies. So you have the original copies, and you have documentation in your hand that shows that this person has done something wrong. And you can go through and talk to them in reference, let's say that it has to do with checks. Does your job have anything to do with check signing? No, it doesn't. So you don't have the authority to write checks. You don't have the authority to do that. No, I don't. Well, who has the authority to do that? Those kind of things. And you talk to them. So, well, then that kind of concerns me, because I have this check, or I have these checks that appear to have your name on them, and they appear to have your account number on them, and I'm rather confused on why that would happen if you don't have the authority to sign these, or you don't have the authority to do this, and I don't understand. Can you explain that to me? Because, obviously there's something going on here that I don't understand. So, and then you can lay out one or two of them, and you can show them to them. What you have to be real cautious about laying evidence out in front of somebody is that if you're dealing with an ego-dominant individual, or I can't think of that off the top of my head, but if there are people that you're going to shock with something, and you shock them, logic-dominant people also, if you try to shock them, it's not logical. So they may shut down. So you have to be real cautious about just dumping things on somebody and overwhelming them, because they can shut down, because you could just kind of short-circuit them, if you will. So you have to be real cautious about moving through that. So you never want to accuse them of doing something wrong, you always want to ask them to explain if they can explain why this transpired. Because believe it or not, there could be a legitimate reason. We know there's probably not, but there could be. So you have to give them the benefit of the doubt for that legitimate reason. So you ask them, I'm sorry, I don't understand. You say that you don't have this authority to do this, but yet I have this. So can you explain it to me? I just need to understand why this happens. And you never want to do that at the beginning of the interview. You always want to do that towards the end of the interview, because you already want to get as much information as you can, because believe it or not, as a forensic accountant, you're not held to Miranda. But if you shock them or you overwhelm them, they may just get up and walk out on you. So maybe you start off with 1 or 2 checks, and then you go, well, okay, are we sure there's not any others? I don't want anything to show up that we haven't been able to explain or discuss. Well, yeah, there might have been some others. Okay, well, how many others do you think? All right, well, I think I might have some more. So you pull them out until 2 or 3 more type of thing. So it's a step process to go through that, because what you don't want to do is just walk in and go, hey, I got 30 checks with your name on them. Can you explain it? And they'll go, nope, sure can't. I'm out of here. And they walk off. So you don't have a story. Okay? You have no idea whether they actually did it, maybe their name, but yet there may be somebody else. Because I've actually seen people forge somebody else's name, set up an account in their name, but somebody else was doing it. So you have to be cautious about that and make sure you go through that steps. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. All right. Any other questions for Doug? All right, Doug. Well, I sure appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time, and definitely we'll follow up with you. But let's thank Doug for his time. Sure appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good night, guys.
I'll follow up with you, Doug. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye now.
Bye.